So I recently watched Dolemite is My Name, the new Eddie Murphy movie that came out on Netflix. I think it was released about 2 weeks ago. It was sitting in my queue for since it came out actually, and I decided to give it a watch on Monday. I wasn't really sure what I was going to think about this movie. I had seen the trailers for it. I wasn't sure what direction they were going to take it in. Even though I do like Eddie Murphy, a lot of his more recent movies haven't been that great in my opinion. So I wasn't 100% sure as to, if we're going to have a great movie or is it going to be a semi-watchable movie or if it's going to be just a horrible movie. Really, after watching this movie, though, I have to say, I really enjoy this movie. This is probably one of my favorite movies of this year. And I think the reason why is because of the cast. There are a lot of people in this movie. And, some faces you'll definitely recognize. Some faces you'll know them. You'll say, okay, I don't know that person's name, but I've seen that face. There's some really big names in here right now. Of course, Eddie Murphy, is probably the biggest one. You also have Keegan-Michael Key, who is, he's pretty big right now. He's getting a lot of roles. You have Wesley Snipes is in here. I mean, Wesley Snipes is not as big as he used to be back in the 90s, but, he's still a pretty well-known name in Hollywood. And he's still a pretty well-known name, period. You have Mike Epps in there. Titus Burgess, I believe is how he pronounces his last name. Chris Rock is in this movie. T.I. is in this movie. Snoop Dogg. So Lunel, she's actually a comedian. I didn't know her name, but I knew her face. And Divine Joy Randolph. I've seen her face before, but I did not know her name. But they all do an awesome job, in my opinion, with the roles that they're given. I mean, this movie is pretty much Eddie Murphy's movie. Eddie Murphy plays the main star, who is Rudy Ray Moore. So for the people that don't know who Rudy Ray Moore is actually, he played Dolemite. He made a film called Dolemite back in 1975. And it actually became a big hit. He did it pretty much self-financed. He didn't really have the backing of a major studio. It's kind of like a triumphant movie because, you see this guy, Rudy Ray Moore. He's just a regular guy. He's not, he's not super attractive. I mean, he's not, he doesn't come from a well-off family. He's not super rich. I mean, not super rich, but he's not super talented. He's just a guy that wants to become famous, and he does anything that he can to become famous. And from that perspective, I kind of respect him. I mean, he started off, I think, as he's pretty much a comedian, and his career was not going well. And then, he picks up this character. He creates this character named Dolemite. And it's just loudmouth, really flashy character. Kind of reminds you of a pimp that talks crap like The Rock used to do when he was wrestling back in WWE. He has these one-liners. He has these really like loud outfits that he likes to wear when he's doing his comedy. And he's just very foul-mouthed. Like a lot of he's just cursing all the time. And some of it is actually pretty funny. Like some of the things that he says in this movie generally made me laugh out loud because is borderline ludicrous, but yet hilarious at the same time. And so really, just to go off of what I just said, so Rudy Ray Moore is a struggling artist. And, he's just trying to get famous. Like, he just wants to get his name out there, and he's getting turned down a lot. A lot of this movie is about just him overcoming obstacles. And then, he meets, I won't spoil the whole movie, but it's just from sheer willpower that all these things start to come into place for him. Like he decides. Okay, so really what he starts to do is he starts to do the comedy as stand-up comedy of a local, what do they call it? Local artists that are really big. He's more of like a local artist that has a little following, in each city he goes, but he's not like a known name. And, one day he goes with his friends to catch a movie. And they sit through this movie, and the movie is pretty bad to them. They think it's not funny. The jokes are pretty lame. And he gets the idea that, that's what I need to do. I need to make a movie so that my image can go out, or my comedy or whatever can go out and reach tons of people. Because he was getting sick of being on the road, traveling all the time, which I understand. I've done a lot of traveling, and it can get tiring. So he decides to make this movie based off of the character that he's playing named Dolemite. And the rest of the film is just him making this movie. He gets, Keegan-Michael Key plays the playwright. He plays Jerry Jones. Now, how they meet's pretty funny because Keegan-Michael Key's character is very message centered. Like all of his plays have a specific message that he wants to get out, which is in total conflict in the beginning with Rudy Ray Moore, who doesn't really give a crap about message. He just wants, karate fights in there, and just like really, car chases and just really ludicrous stuff. So it's funny. It was funny. Some of the funniest parts in this movie is just seeing both of them go back and forth and brainstorm this movie and then write, parts of it. And I just think it's funny. So they play off each other really well. Another thing I will say about this movie is that the main characters, I think, have great chemistry. Like Keegan-Michael Key and Eddie Murphy play off each other really well. They have really great chemistry. And, even though Keegan-Michael Key's character plays like the straight man to Rudy Ray Moore, it's actually believable that they would come together and make a movie and actually be friends. Just from based off, it's really weird. You would never think that they would come together and find mutual ground for a movie, especially like how different they are, but they actually make it work in a really nice way in this movie. Another thing I will say about this movie too is that they make Rudy Ray Moore a very sympathetic character. He's a very likable guy. And I think that's, because of Eddie Murphy too. I've always thought Eddie Murphy was a very likable guy. And he really makes Rudy Ray Moore very likable. You really root for him, because I think we've all been there. You're trying to get something done. You have a goal in mind, but you keep getting knocked down. You keep getting dragged. You just keep going, and sometimes you just have to go through the motions, and then there are other times where, just based on pure willpower, you just have to push yourself through. And so I can identify with Rudy Ray Moore in this movie. And the next probably biggest name, actually I would say of course Eddie Murphy's number one. Divine Joy Randolph, she plays Lady Reed. So Rudy Ray Moore actually meets her in one of the clubs that he's doing his stand-up, and he actually talks her into, doing stand-up as well and touring with him. And then eventually she ends up as one of the lead roles in this Dolemite movie. And their relationship is really nice. I think it's very believable also. And it's very organic. I really like, just the back and forth between them. And, it just makes it a better movie, because even though the movie is funny, it's also very, not emotional, but it has really nice, tender spots that make it, instead of just like one whole laugh track where you're just laughing insanely, but you don't really connect with any of the characters, you don't really care about any of the characters. I think this movie is a great balance of, you understand where they're coming from, but yet you still connect with them, and yet you still like them, because I don't think out of the main characters, there wasn't really a character that I hated in this movie. I really liked Rudy Ray Moore. I really liked Lady Reed. Jerry Jones is who's Keegan-Michael Key. He's probably the next biggest part of this movie. Mike Epps plays Jimmy Lynch, who's just really a friend. And he's actually in the movie he stays in the movie for a pretty long time. He's in there from the beginning and stays till the end. He's more like moral support, and he says some funny lines every now and then. But him and also Craig Robinson, he's in the movie. Doesn't do as much as I thought that he would do, but I think the one other advantage about this movie, or not advantage, but what I like a lot about this movie is that every character, I feel that the movie gives them just enough to make them likable, but not overdoing it. I think Craig Robinson was fine in his role. I've seen other Craig Robinson's movies. Sometimes he can come off as being kind of obnoxious. But I think they did a good job in this movie of making him, just a regular dude, just a likable regular dude. Titus Burgess as well. I haven't seen him in too many things. I think he was in the Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt or whatever that show was. I probably don't even remember. I don't remember the name of that show. But that's the only thing I can think of. No, he's been in other things too. But that's the show that I know him from the most. And he does a good job also. Now, Wesley Snipes is actually, he probably comes in towards the middle of this movie. And his character is very interesting. I actually like the way Wesley Snipes played his character. And he plays Ervil Martin. So Ervil Martin is actually an actor before, but he did really small roles. And Rudy Ray Moore used kind of his clout in order to get this movie going. And I do like Wesley Snipes' portrayal of this guy. I think it's pretty funny. It's kind of different too than a regular typical Wesley Snipes movie, and that's what I really like about it. T.I.'s in the movie for like 2 minutes. He plays Walter Crane. He's actually one of the guys that Rudy Ray Moore pitches his movie to, that rejects him. He's good. He like I said, he literally is in the movie I think for like 2 or 3 minutes. He's good at what he does. No problems there. Chris Rock, he's like the DJ of a radio station, and he's trying to help promote Rudy Ray Moore's movie when it comes out. And he's, like I said, he's not in the movie that much, so if you're looking for Chris Rock to be in this movie, you're going to be disappointed. He's probably in there for less than 5 minutes, but those 5 minutes are good. He does a good job. Linnell plays his aunt. Now, I've seen some of her stand up, and I think she's actually pretty funny. She's not in there long either. So is Snoop Dogg. So is Tasha Smith. So some of these other people are not in the movie for very long, but when they are in the movie, their parts are good. They do a good job with what they're given. But I don't want to spoil the whole movie, even though there's really not a spoiler. The movie is literally about how this Dolemite movie was made, and also explores Rudy Ray Moore's, psychology and why he wanted to make this movie. I definitely think that, I've watched some reviews and people are saying that, Eddie Murphy deserves like an Oscar. I wouldn't go that far. I think he's really good in this role. The only thing is that even though Eddie Murphy plays Rudy Ray Moore, I still see Eddie Murphy playing Rudy Ray Moore, if that makes sense. Like, he doesn't really transition into the full character, in my opinion. He's just Eddie Murphy playing this guy. because Eddie Murphy is just such a big name and such a standout. But that doesn't mean he doesn't do a good job. He does a really good job with making this guy relatable and likable. You know, and you want to root for him and you want him to do well and be successful. You know, but in my opinion, you still see Eddie Murphy in this role. You know, everyone else, like I said, does a good job. The cinematography, it's shot well. You know, it's very good actually. It's one of the better Netflix original movies. I was skeptical, I have to admit. You know, I've seen a lot of the Netflix original movies, and in all honesty, 90% of them I think are trash. And if they're not trash, they're either very low budget. Netflix also has a real big issue with their sci-fi movies. Their sci-fi movies and their sci-fi TV shows are god awful. But they're really bad. Most of them. Some of them are okay, you know, but some of them are rough. But I think, I'm not sure if this is going to be a big hit. You know, I'm not sure if it's going to revitalize Eddie Murphy's career. I know that he's coming out with another Coming to America, and another Beverly Hills Cop, I believe, was in talks. I'm not sure if this is going to relaunch that and actually push it forward. But like I said, I think this movie is really funny. It's very heartwarming. You root for the people in this movie. They're very likable. They're very relatable. The bad guy, or not the bad guy, but the person you probably will root for the least is Wesley Snipes' character of Dearvel Martin. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. I'm probably butchering it. He kind of came off as like a little bit of a dick at certain times. But, you know, even that though, I think he still did a good job. Like I said 100 times before, I really liked how he portrayed that character. But yeah, I mean, if you like comedy and you just like biographies, you know, obviously this is not the exact story of how this movie was made. There were definitely liberties taken. But, you know, this movie is definitely more of pays homage to Rudy Ray Moore. You know, sometimes these movies seem like they're not making fun of the person instead of actually rooting for the person or honoring them. And this movie is definitely not that. So I think, you know, they did a great job with this. I really hope it does well for Netflix. And I hope that Netflix learns from this and they start making more movies like this. You know, they have a lot of money and they're putting a lot of money into content. And like I said before, a lot of their movies or original TV shows are not that good. And I'm not sure why. You know, it just doesn't really come together for me. But this is definitely a standout. And I really hope that more people watch it and more people give it credit for what it really is. And, you know, I'm hearing a lot of buzz about it. You know, and I think the buzz is real. I think it's good. And, you know, if you're definitely hesitant about this movie, check it out. If you're an Eddie Murphy fan, definitely check this movie out. I think you'll like it. But yeah, those are my thoughts on this movie. Thanks again for listening.